opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's Statement of Compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called The Network of Global Corporate Control. In today's segment, we're going to tell you Russia's part in the global currency reset. Thank you to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and to Cruchet Starnes, Audio and Prompter. We're going to follow storytelling rules as we do when we're expecting newbies. This story is going to have a start. I'm going to introduce you to the villain and main character of the story, and I'm going to update you on where we are in this story. Rules of storytelling. If you want more background, I'm giving you a link in the teleprompter to the August 9th, 2017 segment where we also followed rules of storytelling. You can get the teleprompter from YouTube archives, which you can find if you go to my website. You can view the videos. There are over 200 of them on YouTube on the Banking Cartel. This story starts way back in 9200 BC, which is when the oldest pyramid in Egypt, the Khufu Pyramid, was built. This date can be calculated with certainty by a sky map on a shaft in Khufu Pyramid. And we have a link to a video which explains that to you also on the teleprompter. The villain of the story.
This is a message to the Russian army and the Russian people. This great Russian Major General Konstantin P. Petrov saw the Pharaoh show and knows how the Nazi Templars of Octagon, Switzerland were the brain behind World War II, who are responsible for the murder on 25 million Russians because the Swiss Nazi Octagon Templars financed and ordered Hitler throughout the whole war. Let's team up.
Сейчас вот это то, что многие политики называют мировое правительство, силы Запада, там как Жириновский, мировое закулисье, это и есть. И сейчас, начиная со времен Древнего Египта, вот эта мафия, которая управляет процессами на планете Земля, она мигрировала, и сейчас ее основная штаб-квартира – это Швейцария. Кстати, вот информация к размышлению. Многие зрители наверняка смотрели фильм «17 мгновений весны» про Штирлиц. Если там помните, вот вся Европа полыхала в пожарах войны, а доктор Плечнер кормил лебедей в Женевском озере. И спрашивается, если фюрер был такой лихой малый, то почему бы ему не взять и не грабануть швейцарские банки? Там же ведь деньги, золото лежало. А Гитлер туда не пошел. То есть Швейцария была неприкосновенной. Почему? Да потому что Гитлер прекрасно понимал, что в Швейцарии находятся его хозяева. И весь победный марш Гитлера по Европе был ничем иным, как сдача ему под единое руководство всего людского, промышленного и военного потенциала Европы для броска на СССР. А зачем? А дело в том, что осуществляя вот эту самую глобализацию, вот эти глобализаторы, они подвели человечество к глобальному системному кризису. И
This rare picture shows Adolf Hitler in Zurich, Switzerland in 1923, when the Swiss Templars financed him 30,000 Swiss francs, which is about €500,000 today, for the first financing only. And for the rest of the war, the Swiss Nazi Templars gave all the orders and made the concentration camps possible, even ordering them. These are all Swiss Nazi Templars' ideas.
Ее уже мы продаем. Я вот помню маленьким мальчиком, то есть я из-под крана запросто воду пьешь, и, в общем, никаких проблем. А теперь из-под крана вряд ли кто воду пьет. Даже детишки уже не пьют. Они знают, бутылочки надо покупать, продавать там, из них водичку пить. Следующая проблема вот в этом смысле, чтобы представить ее, как она решается. Вот представьте, мы та самая мафия. Мы живем в Швейцарии. Вот. А в Чернобыле как жахнуло, как говорил Петруха, помните, в белом солнце пустыни. И радиоактивное облачко может до нас докатиться, и с неба дождичек может покапать.
I'm going to speak a little bit about Konstantin Petrov, who was a major general in the Russian army before he was murdered in 2009. The villain of the story. The villain in the story is a group of nobility called the Black Nobility. They're the oligarchic families of Venice and Genoa, and that in Italian is called Genova. It's an historical port city in northern Italy and the capital of the region of Liguria. The Black Nobility were descended from ancient Egyptian pharaonic bloodline families. The Egyptians called themselves Kemet or Kemet, meaning black. In the 12th century, these families held the privileged trading rights, monopolies. The first of three crusades from 1063 to 1123 established the power of the Venetian black nobility and solidified the power of the wealthy ruling class. I described the black nobility in a link in the teleprompter. The way that the black nobility have managed to stay in power for more than 10,000 years is through our corrupt money system. It's a simple trick. Don't use real money. Use fake money. Real money is gold or silver or anything valuable that can be used in a barter system to trade for something valuable. And the hero of the story is Jose Rizal, a man from the Philippines who was the superior general of the Jesuits at the end of World War II. This position is also known as the Black Pope. Jose Rizal put the vast wealth that used to be held by the Vatican on deposit in a trust called the Global Debt Facility for the benefit of humanity. Jose Rizal's lawyer was Ferdinand Marcos. Rizal and Marcos created the World Bank and International Monetary Fund as a big world cooperative to make sure the world's wealth wasn't stolen and went to the world's people. That's where I come in. I figured out what Rizal and Marcos had done. I got a bit of help to figure this out. When I say a bit of help, I mean actually a lot of help. The world's military powers, all of them, are making sure we stay the course, that the world's wealth stays with the world's people. I told you last month how I bankrupted the corrupt officials in the World Bank who were trying to steal the world's wealth from the world's people, and I did this using the common law. And the network of global corporate control teleprompter is also linked in the YouTube. Last week, I reminded you about Jose Rizal. And what happened the next hour was I was nearly killed because somebody ran a red light. But I have a pretty good sense of intuition and self-preservation, so I didn't go into the intersection. I just saw this car speeding by, going about 60. I would have been sideswiped. Jose Rizal set things up so we could work in peace to defeat the banking cartel, and that is precisely what we are doing. The Russian people, the villains of our story, are big liars, And because they have hijacked the world's money by using fake paper money instead of real money, they have bought up all the politicians, the media, the journalists, the universities, you name it. The villains of our story want you to think that the Russian people are our enemies, and they are not. And just a couple of weeks ago, the New York Times ran an article trying to show us that the Russians are our enemies. And I tweeted, of course, saying that Russia should bring a blend of political, economic, that was what the New York Times said. And they said that the United States was Russia's chief adversary. And that is absolutely incorrect. During World War II, 25 million Russian people lost their lives. World War II was really fought to wipe out many of the clever Russian people. And you saw Major General Petrov. He's one of those clever people. There's another very clever Russian. That's not Konstantin, that's Katasanov. And Katasanov has told us some very important things. Now, if you can just scroll down, that's a lead-in to the video that we've already seen. And now let me tell you about Valentin Katasanov. He's an eminent Russian economist who's critical of the Russian central bank. Katasanov writes about the role of gold as real money. Katasanov wrote a study dealing with new documents that confirm the organization of the Second World War II by the United States and United Kingdom bankers. Katasanov has written that World War II was started by President Franklin Roosevelt and Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain in the hope of destroying the USSR. The war was not unleashed by a frenzied Führer who happened to be ruling Germany at the time. World War II was a project created by world oligarchy or Anglo-American money owners. We call this group the Network of Global Corporate Control. We know that it's the bloodline families that go back to the times of the ancient pharaohs in Egypt that direct the Network of Global Corporate Control. This group used the United States Federal Reserve System and the Bank of England to prepare for the World War after World War I. The USSR was the target. Some of the people in Russia, it's true, have been fooled by the Black Nobility and the bankers. That's why the Russian army, when it liberated Auschwitz, put in gas chambers that the Germans had not used in Auschwitz. I told you about what really happened in Auschwitz 3 years ago, and you can see links to that show. The IG Farben Buna plant near Auschwitz was a uranium enrichment facility comparable, if not exceeding, the Manhattan Project. The shipment of 560 kilograms of enriched uranium, as well as ignition mechanisms for plutonium bombs, were on the German submarine U-234, which headed for Japan, and it surrendered to the United States in May 1945. The analysis of the Oak Ridge production records by Carter Heydrich established that the Manhattan Project could not have produced enough enriched uranium to produce a uranium bomb in August 1945, and they didn't have the technology that was needed to ignite a plutonium bomb. In other words, the atomic bombing of Japan in August 1945 would not have been possible without the enriched uranium produced at Auschwitz, nor the German plutonium bomb ignition devices which were captured from Germany's U-234 in 1945. 3 years ago, I told you about a study by Katasanov about the establishment of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund at the end of World War II, and there are links to the teleprompter for the May 19th, 2015 segment and the video in the YouTube archives. You can also read from the teleprompter how the International Court of Justice and the CIA attempted to steal the gold in the global debt facility after it was deposited with the World Bank and IMF Board of Governors at the end of World War II. The banking cartel is much weaker than we are. We're the ones that own the world's wealth. In an early DCTV episode, I told you that the conference that began the World Bank and International Monetary Fund in 1944 voted to close the Bank for International Settlements, called the BIS. That is what we, together with the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, are doing now. And this information comes from Katasanov. This is a quote from him. The Bretton Woods Conference, formerly known as the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference, was the gathering of 730 delegates from all 44 allied nations at the Mount Washington Hotel situated in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the United States, to regulate the international monetary and financial order after the conclusion of World War II. This is the conference that started the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. The conference was held from 1 to 22 July 1944. All of a sudden, the issue of the Bank of International Settlements hit the agenda. It was reported that the bank collaborated with fascist Germany. Leaving many details aside, I'd only mention that with great difficulty, because some U.S. delegates opposed the motion, the delegates reached an agreement to close the BIS. The decision of International Conference has never been enacted. All the discreditable information related to the BIS wartime activities was classified. Today, it helps to falsify the history of the Second World War, and that's the end of the quote from Katasanov. I'm saving the best information from some clever mathematicians at the Moscow State University for last. I have mentioned the Chronology project many times in this series. This 7-volume series tells us that our history has been falsified by the Jesuits. I've read much of what is in the first 4 volumes, and I'm going to read you from the back cover of the first volume of the Chronology project. Jesus Christ was born in 1053 AD and was crucified in 1086 AD. The Old Testament refers to medieval events. Apocalypse was written after 1486 AD. This is not quite what you learned in school. This version of events is more substantiated by hard facts and logic, validated by new astronomical research and statistical analysis of ancient sources than anything you have read and heard about history before. The so-called consensual history is a finely woven magic fabric of intricate lies about events predating the 16th century. There is not a single piece of firm written evidence or artifact that could be reliably and independently traced back earlier than the 11th century. The archaeological, dendrochronological, paleographical, and carbon methods of dating of ancient sources and artifacts are non-exact and contradictory. The dominating historical discourse in its current state was essentially crafted in the 16th century from a rather contradictory jumble of sources, such as innumerable copies of ancient Latin and Greek manuscripts whose originals have vanished in the Dark Ages, and the allegedly irrefutable proof delivered by the late medieval astronomers, all cemented by the power of the ecclesial authorities. Nearly all of its components are blatantly untrue. And I'm going to use whatever time we have left to try and end this segment without the teleprompter. Of course, the ending to the story is still up in the air. And what I want to tell you is that this is a joint effort. We are all in this together. But if you think critically, you understand that what you're believing as facts, and many people are believing as facts, they're brought to you by corruption, because all of the money is just fake. It's not based on gold. We decoupled our money from gold a long time ago. And all of the governments, all of them, are companies, including the United States. Our Constitution was suspended. It's been suspended a number of times. It started actually in the Civil War. And the legal profession, most of the lawyers are not really cued in to what is actual reality. Now, the thing about reality is that it's not what you think it is. It's not what the banking cartel is telling you. It's not what the institutions that are being bribed by fake paper money. That's if you think that if a lot of people believe something, it must be true, then you're obviously not going to understand what reality. But fortunately, there are enough skeptical people who rely on proof, who are convinced by proof, and once enough critical people realized that the banking cartel had been lying to them about history, this became reality, because when what we call a critical mass of people believe something, this makes it manifest in reality. And I've put a little bit of information about this. It's called the collective unconscious, and Carl Jung is one of the people who understands this. But really, many of the things that I'm telling you, you just have to try to think critically. And one of the difficulties is that it's very hard for some people to think independently because of very powerful electromagnetic weapons. And these weapons don't usually appear in the news because, as I said, the news is dominated by groups that are bribed by the fake paper money. So, and this corruption has been in place for 9,200 years, actually more. That's 9,200 BC. So you add in 2,000 years after that. It's over 10,000 years. So you can realize that most of the institutions have been infiltrated by agents of the banking cartel. And you're going to have to learn how to think independently. And this electromagnetic weaponry makes it very difficult for some people to think independently. It's a form of hypnosis, actually. And there are people who are less sensitive, and you can actually develop independence from this weaponry. One of the best ways to exercise your brain is through music. And I happen to play the cello, and I'm playing the cello very actively, also because these weapons are being used on me. And it was very difficult to prepare this series, and today especially, because of the weaponry. But you see, we did manage, and the people at DCTV can tell you that somebody scrambled the teleprompters that I emailed them. Either that, or I was scrambled and I mixed them up. But we somehow managed, because I had uploaded these things on the internet, we did manage. Now let me tell you some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. One of the things is about money. We have used gold for thousands of years as our money. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be exchanging this fake paper money for gold. Then the gold was set aside in the World Bank as a cooperative. Now, people are very suspicious of the World Bank and IMF, and rightfully so, because it's been the network of global corporate control has gotten in there and tries to dominate the place. And the security guards, Allied Barton, that's the banking cartel. So, but there is a coalition in the World Bank of the countries that are working independently. The BRICS are a core of this, but since many of the governments have been taken over by the banking cartel, you see that it's a work in progress. But we know that this coalition is much stronger than the banking cartel, and one of the ways we know this is from a power transition model that came to me in 2004 from the National War College, and this is extremely accurate. So this coalition is in effect, and I'm working with that coalition, and I'm working with them every day, and part of that coalition is the uncorrupted forces in the world's military powers. And I can tell you that they've worked themselves loose, and I know this because there are, first of all, in November of 2017, there was an attack from a Marine unit that went to the CIA, not its headquarters, because the CIA is headquartered in Switzerland. It went to Langley, Virginia, and there were eyewitness accounts of this attack. There have been eyewitness accounts of an attempted nuke in October 2013, and we ran a tape. There were a number of people in the U.S. military who were fired by the brass, and this has activated the military. They didn't want to nuke Charleston, and that's what they were ordered to do. So there were two heroes who took that nuclear device and they threw it 600 miles off the coast of Charleston. And there's a clip where you can see I believe it was over 200 people in the military who were fired. Now this obviously has alerted the military, and they watch the clips that we have here in DCTV, and they realize, they know it's their power transition model. So they know that we are actually stronger than the banking cartel. Thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. We've been talking about the difference between the lies that many people believe and cold, hard facts that some clever people in Russia are telling us. It's up to us to own up to actual reality that we're living in. One of the ways to do this is to replace fake paper money that holds this corrupt network of global corporate control in place with the real money, which local currencies issued by local communities. That's real money. Local communities all over the world are taking ownership for their people's employment, economic fate, and general well-being. Local currencies are the most important part of the global currency reset because they set a healthy standard and provide the foundation and essential building block for a clean financial system. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Udis.